Thank you. Good morning. I'm a filmmaker. I'm also a palimpsest. Palimpsest can be understood as the idea of layering, where new work is layered on top of old work. That work can be writing, painting, film, any form of art. And evidences or traces of the old work is evident in the new work, creating new levels of meaning. I like the definition from Cambridge Dictionary, which defines palimpsest as a formal something that has many levels of meaning and types of style that build on each other. In the context of art, palimpsesting refers to, again, this idea of layering, where in that process, each iteration of the artwork is a work in progress. And that work in progress draws from past knowledge, experiences, and individual creativity. In the context of film, film as a palimpsest can be studied as both a physical artifact, but also as a mental phenomenon and process, where one reads, reinterprets, and rewrites film, palimpsesting it layer by layer. And we see that through each phase in the production process. Script writing, shooting, editing. You rewrite, you reshoot, you re-edit. By creating a representation of space and time, the artist then distances the work from the audience, bringing about something that's not present, something that's foreign and new. This is done by exaggerating the filmmaker's experiences of culture, filtering and presenting that something through her own translation. At the same time, the artist also creates a story of her own history, her own narrative of meanings. And this is really the focus of my presentation today, the idea of the filmmaker as a palimpsest, rewriting myself through my work. And for this, we have to go a little into my history. And I've conveniently broken it down into these 3 eras. There's a Taylor Swift reference right there, the Eras Tour. This is my TED Talk, Eras TED Talk. So the rebel, the resourceful, and the renewed. We start with the rebel phase. At the age of 17, 18, around your age, I was an angry teenager, as you can see, angry. I had a lot of angst, that's very normal for your age, but I also had a lot of personal family trauma. My sister passed away when I was 5. She had a congenital heart disease. And my parents divorced when I was 18, right smack in the middle of my A-levels. They could not have picked a better time. You can imagine how difficult it was. I was doing very bad academically, and it was miserable. And the cherry on top of the miserable cake was when my teacher said to me, "You will amount to nothing in life." This is what she said to me. And it pissed me off, fueled my anger. But I channeled that anger into my first film, which I shot in Australia. That's me in the white in the background. The film was about delinquent girls. There's the cast and crew who are in a girls' home and they're mistreated and they take revenge by going on a murderous rampage. There's the anger coming out, right? The film, while it expressed my personal anger, it also expressed our collective anger, because filmmakers tell stories not just from what's happening within, but also based on events happening around them. And what was happening around us was the rise of Pauline Hanson in Australia at the time. Those who are old enough might know the news. Pauline Hanson formed the One Nation Party around 1996, 97. The One Nation Party was pushing against multiculturalism and immigration, citing multiculturalism as a threat to Australian values, culture, and identity, and sort of criticizing immigration as leading to the Asianization of Australia. So it was pushing very much for a white Australia policy, which of course affected all of us, right? We were just students trying to get an education overseas, but overnight we became the enemy. I had friends walking down the street who would get punched and attacked just because they were Asian. Our film, half the crew were Australian. They abandoned the project midway. Our professors, also Australian, distanced themselves from us. It was very, very hurtful when that happened. So we were angry. We were angry with these developments. We were angry with these changes. And of course, things came to a high when even then Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir, was recalling all the Malaysian students to come back. So we actually felt quite threatened in that space. But the film, while it expresses our anger, it doesn't really address the root of it. It's just lashing out. So I had to look more closely inwards in that sense. The work was not truly an honest reflection of what I was really feeling or thinking. It was just, like I said, lashing out. So I had to grow up. I had to experience life. To be a good filmmaker, you need life experience. So a few years passed and cut to me pursuing film at the master's level in Boston in the US. And the plan was to go there, be a filmmaker, settle in the US. And this happens. 9/11. Changed everything, turned the world upside down. If you travel today, you will know the security requirements that you go through is a consequence of 9/11, right? The tragedy had a very personal impact on me because I also lost a friend in the tragedy. She was in the first plane that hit the first tower of the World Trade Center. She died along with her husband and her 7-month-old unborn child. She was 7 months pregnant. So it's emotional, right? You can imagine how it affected me. And I was a filmmaker at the time. And the next day, we actually had to go to school. Can you imagine? Going to school, sitting in film class, and asking ourselves, what is the point? Why am I a filmmaker when this is happening? What can I possibly do? Right? So things were very, very tense for us. Life got even more difficult because the US Homeland Security launched this terrorism threat advisory scale, which is color-coded. And it's like a terror alert system. And every morning we'd have to listen to the radio and it would tell you, today is code orange, today is code yellow, or whatever. And it's supposed to determine how stressed and terrified you're supposed to feel that day going out and how threatened we're supposed to be because anytime there's going to be a terrorist attack. So it was a very, very, can you imagine, a very stressful, tense period for us and for me living there. And I desperately wanted to go home. More than ever, this is where I became a very patriotic Singaporean. It's like, I want to go home. I want to be in peaceful Singapore, right? But I couldn't because I had my obligations. And also because actually right after 9/11, all planes were grounded. There was no planes in the sky, no planes were allowed to take off, right? So at a time when you most want to fly out, you actually cannot fly. And that's a very surreal experience. So I felt stuck. Very, very stuck in where I was. And that led me to the making of my next film, which is called Stuck. And it's about 3 strangers who are stuck in an elevator overnight, and they are also stuck in their lives. And together in that communal experience, they have to deal with their issues. Like all of them have deep-seated issues. So this film obviously was very emotional for me because I had to draw on loss, anger, sadness, but also this message of hope and strength and overcoming adversity. And I would say through that film, it was my first honest work where I really grew up, I think, and really made a film that spoke from my heart. But then, of course, that ends, and I go back to Singapore. And that marks the end of the rebel phase. I had grown up by then. Now, coming back to Singapore is a whole other ball game. Like I said earlier, I want to come back to Singapore, but then you don't quite, when you're away, you forget actually what Singapore is. Singapore is a one-of-a-kind place You know, it's hyper real, highly controlled surveillance state. It's been described as Disneyland with the death penalty, right? This environment is not conducive to art making in general. As a filmmaker, we struggle with lots of limitations, countless restrictions. There is censorship. There is the lack of budget. There is control at every level. There is a very small domestic market for when our films are made. And to have to navigate and negotiate all these things is part and parcel of being a filmmaker in Singapore. So what did I have to do? Hustle. Go through the motions, meet, talk to people, do anything to sell myself, sell my film, pretty much sell my soul. You know, these are not really random pictures. These are actually established filmmakers. There's Boris Bu, who's a Singapore director. There's Byung-Jil Jang, who's a Korean director. Some celebrities that you might recognize, Yo Yen Yen, Alaric Tay. Working with these people were great, right? But you're kind of going through the motions. You're kind of doing, you're doing work that's kind of serving the state, but it's part and parcel of the business, as I would say. So I did this for a while, and to distract myself from all of that, I also made my own side films, my independent films, which were all these sort of light, I would say light, happy films that, you know, kept us on the safe side of the law. And a lot of these films involved my students, which made it kind of meaningful. So it's a whole bunch of films from different genres, drama, comedy, and sci-fi, and action, as you can see. I also did a lot of corporate work during that period because you can't survive on just filmmaking in Singapore. So NDP I worked on for a couple of years. Did a music video with Kit Chan. This was quite a great experience. We got to go to New York. Singapore Day, also in New York. I also dabbled in theater. First time I had to write and star in it. No, I played a gambling mother in it. And the production was presented, the guest of honor was President of Singapore. And I remember meeting him for the first time, and I was quite nervous because, you know, how do you meet the President of Singapore? So if you remember that Mr. Bean episode where he's going to meet the Queen and he's thinking, do I bow, do I curtsy? I was going through that same process. But when I met him, you know, I was all ready to be very formal, but here, you know, he's exactly like that, how he is in the photo, very, very down to earth. And the first thing he said to me is, "Oh, you are the gambler." You know, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is how the President of Singapore remembers me. Not great first impression, but okay, it was an honor to meet him. And the experience was, you know, unforgettable. More significantly, during this period, I also founded Project Give Pray Love, which is charity work that I do in Vietnam. And it's been ongoing for 25 years, but PGPL was only founded in 2014. And we make annual trips to Vietnam, and we help the poor in terms of housing, bicycles, education, medical fees. So you can see this is our beneficiary. I mean, if you look at the state of his house, we're talking about the poorest of the poor in the Mekong Delta, and these are the communities that we help and serve. The lady there who's giving out these donations, that's my mother. She's my partner in this initiative. So you can see these are our beneficiaries. And I'm usually the one behind the camera. My mother does the communication and the PR work because she's also part Vietnamese. So this was very meaningful for me, and I would say during this phase of my life, I you know, the resourceful phase, right? I did many things, and I wore the hats of not just filmmaker but also educator and changemaker, which was especially meaningful. And then of course we also did more work, Film for Good, which is a spin-off. And actually I worked with tertiary students. I brought them down for documentary making and doing goodwill charity work. And so there's more information. It's a bit of a plug because we're always looking for volunteers and supporters, completely self-funded by me. So yes, please support. And okay, that brings us to the final era, which is the renewed phase. By this point, I had been in Singapore for 10 years. I'd been doing corporate work, working in education. I was burning out and also questioning sort of what was the next thing for me. I had the dream to do a PhD since young, and I thought, okay, well, it's now or never. But I was also in my 40s. You know, the average age of a PhD student is 27. So 40 is kind of old, right? And I was in a stable job, had a kind of a good income, and I thought, am I going to drop all this, you know, leave Singapore again, go to a foreign place and deal with all of that again? So it was a time of reassessment, but also a time of renewal, because I bit the bullet and I went ahead. And trying to go to film school at the PhD level is extremely difficult. There are very few schools that offer what I wanted to do, which is a PhD with creative practice, which is a hybrid PhD that allows you to do a thesis as well as a creative artwork, because I wanted to continue being a practitioner. And very few schools offered that. And we're talking about schools that graduate the likes of people like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, you know, Martin Scorsese. So we're talking very high level, right? It's very, very competitive. So I had, you know, it took 2 years to apply. It was an arduous process. After countless rejections and a few acceptances, which I said no to, I ended up in New Zealand. And I chose to go to the University of Canterbury in Christchurch. And I quit my job at SMU, was about to get on the plane, ready to fly there, when I suddenly get a call and they say, sorry, the department is restructuring and we cannot support your PhD, and so can you withdraw from the program? And I'm like, what? I just quit my job and I waited 2 years and this is the kind of news you tell me, you know? So it was very unnerving, but I thought, okay, stay calm. Think what's the next thing to do, right? So next thing is I have to backtrack, go back to the universities that I had rejected. You know, my second choice was University of Auckland. I went back to them and said, you know, yes, I know, I said I declined your offer, but now can you give me the offer again, because I really would like to join you, blah, 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 blah. And graciously, they said yes, they took me in. And so I end up in Auckland, and at the University of Auckland, where I did my PhD with creative practice. Now, this was my topic that I chose to do my PhD in, and it's also the film that I did. It is a documentary film, and I chose to do a documentary because after years of narrative work, because I thought, you know, it's time for me to really go back into the hardware and tell stories about real people, real issues. And of course, all my charity work also exposed me to a lot of these things, marginalization and marginalized communities. And I thought, okay, this is I can give a voice to these people through the documentary. And of course, I picked the biggest possible topic you can do as a Singaporean, which is Singapore identity. But I was looking at it through the lens of Singapore cinema. I wrote the thesis. This is 201 pages. Okay, 201. How long is your assignment? 5 pages. So don't worry, doable. After 201 pages, other PhD students go out, drink champagne and celebrate. I had to continue making my film because crazy me chose to do a hybrid PhD. So the documentary is on the same topic, and it involved me flying back and forth New Zealand and Singapore, multiple trips that I had to make. It took 2 years alone just to make this film because I'm also writing the PhD at the same time. I ended up interviewing 75 people from different ages, races, and social backgrounds. I also included most of Singapore's filmmakers in my film, which is something almost an impossible feat, but I managed to do it. It took a lot out of me because I was very much working as a one-man show. I had so much material. It was 100 hours worth of interviews that I had. Imagine trying to edit that. It took me 6 months alone just to log and transcribe the material. My first cut of the film, 14 and a half hours. What is this, an epic? An epic film? No, so I had to cut it down, right? So from 14 and a half hours, I cut it down to 8 hours. From 8 hours, I cut it some more to 2.5 hours, a bit more normal. Finally down to an hour to meet the PhD requirement. That process is palimpsesting, because I am rewriting and re-editing my film as I go along. And in the industry, we call that killing our babies, right? Killing your babies because you are getting rid of material that is very dear to you, right? So that was the process. And so now I have my film and I have so much material that I can actually make a 3-part series. So that is in progress. I want to show you this last picture because that's what filmmakers look like. People think it's very glamorous. All they see is the red carpet and the waving to the paparazzi. That's what it is. It's grinding, grueling work, and yes, very auntie. I have a shopping cart because I'm an auntie filmmaker now, right? All my camera and sound gear is in that shopping cart, and that big thing there is the tripod. And everywhere I go, lugging these things, they're like, oh, you are a musician, but are you going to NTUC? That's what I look like. And anyway, that's the premiere. So I would say at the end of this that this last film is very close to my heart, because as much as it addresses Singapore's identity, it also addresses my identity. And through the work, I saw myself changing. I had my perceptions changed, my ideas changed. So the process was very much palimpsesting because I was evolving with my work. As filmmakers, we engage with the past and the present, but the final film output is always in the future, right? And what that means is all the ideas, all the emotions that go into the making of the film change. It's a process, and it changes by the time the film is made. Which is why I say that the film is a palimpsest, but I am also the palimpsest, because we are both undergoing that change together. On a final note, this is a quote that I leave my film students at the end of the course. It is to remind us as filmmakers why we do the work we do, and how as palimpsests we examine the human condition and we let you see the world through our eyes. Thank you.